Well, CNN and MSNBC just can't keep lying to you, can they? Well, sure they can. We've seen it for decades now. But it looks like the actual feelings of regular Washingtonians, people who have to live in the crime-infested streets of our nation's capital, well, they're catching up to the lies that they're being told by the mainstream media and by the Democrats. And both CNN and MSNBC had to come clean over the last 12 hours, and we're going to show you some of the highlights. Let's start with Morning Joe this morning.
I live in Washington. This is personal for me. Many people are frustrated with crime that we see, particularly committed by juveniles in the city of Washington. People are frustrated, Willie, that when they go to CVS to buy deodorant, that they have to get it from behind locked plexiglass, right? But the response here, and let me say this, right? These are not just random anecdotes. What we see in Washington Post polling, among others, is that roughly half of DC residents, mostly half of DC residents, view this as a serious problem or an extremely serious problem.
Wow, that's saying something. Half of DC residents see crime and criminals in their midst as either a serious problem or a very serious problem. It's almost like Trump gets it. It's almost like Trump and Republicans who are finally trying to do something about it because they've had enough, and enough is definitely genuinely enough, are actually demonstrating good governance and law enforcement at a time when the people who are suffering because of the horrific failed policies of the Democrats want some action. And action is exactly what they're getting. It's almost like all the people who have what the kids like to call a lived experience every day, walking their own streets, walking and riding the metro in Washington, D.C., and feeling intimidated or feeling like they're victims of crime or knowing that they know someone who is a victim of a crime. It's almost like looking at those cooked up books and graphs and charts and stats don't really make a big difference in their lives when they're about to get carjacked. Morning Joe continued, this time with Chris Matthews, longtime D.C. resident, trying to warn Democrats about the dangers of being on the side of the criminals.
And the murder rate. You can't keep saying violent crime is down, but the murder rate's up. To the average person, the murder rate's about life and death. You don't brag about a rising murder rate. And the Democrats are, I agree with you, Mika, they're falling into the trap of defending what's indefensible.
It's a trap. Yes, it's a trap. I mean, if it's not a winner politically to say, oh, you're wrong, look at the data, because, if one violent crime happens in a very heavily populated part of the city, people hear about it and it's visceral. They don't want it. And they'll gravitate to the person who appears to be doing something about it.
Boy, they changed their tune in just one day, didn't they? This is phenomenal. I want to break this down quickly because we've got a lot of clips to get to, but this deserves its own little hallway in the TV media bias, ludicrous, idiotic Hall of Fame.
And the murder rate. You can't keep saying violent crime is down, but the murder rate's up. To the average person, the murder rate's about life and death.
To the average person, murder is about life and death. To your typical person, not enlightened, educated people like us who get to read teleprompters on television and make millions of dollars. To us, we know that murder is, well beyond and transcends life and death. To the average person, murder is about life and death. I'm pretty sure everybody considers murder a life and death issue.
You don't brag about a rising murder rate. And the Democrats are, I agree with you, Mika. They're falling into the trap of defending what's indefensible.
It's a trap. Yes,
it's a trap. And of course, let's just play the conversation out here. If it's a trap, that means somebody set the trap. Somebody evil, somebody dastardly, somebody maniacal who's twirling their evil mustache. Who set the trap? You know who. That fascist authoritarian Donald Trump. He's trapped the Democrats. He's forced these Democrats into a trap that he devised with Stephen Miller, probably, to force Democrats to defend murder, to defend murderers and the politicians who enable them. It's amazing. But I'm sure the Democrats in this town are way too smart to get caught into that trap, right? Let's check in with one of the leading Democrats. In fact, he's the leader of the Democrats in the House. Some would say that he's the next man in line to be Speaker of the House. That's a big deal. Hakeem Jeffries, you're smart enough to fall into that trap, aren't you? Yeah, he stuck in the trap. Hakeem Jeffries posts violent crime in Washington, D.C. is at a 30-year low. I mean, just look at the numbers, everybody. Donald Trump has no basis to take over the local police department and zero credibility on the issue of law and order. Get lost. By the way, I said yesterday that the president's powers to take over the local police department is for 48 hours, which it is in most cases. But based on the emergency actions he's triggered, he actually has 30 days in total. But that's only for command and control of the Metropolitan Police Department in D.C. After those 30 days, by the way, he can go back to Congress and get reauthorization, which if he wants it and needs it, he probably could. But in terms of the control over federal law enforcement and having them and directing them to integrate and support and give reinforcements to local police department, he has that power in perpetuity. That's part of the executive branch's power. But I just want to make sure that was clear for everybody watching. So there you go. Hakeem Jeffries, violent crime in D.C. is at a 30-year low. Hakeem Jeffries has the pleasure of armed security in Washington wherever he goes. So I guess for Hakeem Jeffries, everything's just great. Over on CNN, none other than S.E. Cupp. Remember her? S.E. Cupp has actually seen a little bit of the light when it comes to this. But understand, anybody like Chris Matthews or Mika Brzezinski or going on television and saying, things are pretty bad in D.C. Maybe, they're not doing this because they want things to get better. They're not saying this because they think Trump is right, even if he is. They're not saying anything on cable news in support of the president's actions because they actually want to solve the crime problem. No, the reason they're saying things is, as you just saw, they don't want Democrats to get hurt by this. They see this as a political issue, beginning, middle, and end. That's the entire perspective. They don't care about the murder rate. They don't care about carjackings. They don't care about armed robbery. They don't care about violence. They care about Democrats defeating Republicans. So take it away, SE.
Yeah, I think a few things can be true. One is that I think he's using this issue to distract for some other things. That doesn't mean it's a bad political strategy. I think it's a very good one. And the numbers can be what they are, but also people don't feel that way. And when it comes to two things, crime and the economy, feelings don't really care about your facts. And I can't tell you how profoundly stupid it is for Democrats to get up with their facts and their figures and their charts and their graphs and say, look, you're safe. Can't you read this chart, idiots? Why are you complaining? I'm showing you right here how safe you are. So shut up and move along. I don't have to tell you how profoundly stupid that is because voters told you how profoundly stupid that was in 2024 when Democrats said, see these economic numbers? The economy's great. What are you complaining about? See these crime numbers? Crime's down. You're safe. See these immigration numbers? Obama deported way more. There's no migrant crisis. I can't tell you enough that politics is perception and the numbers can be right, but you never tell voters they're wrong about how they feel.
All right. Listen, I'll give her due. That is a correct observation, but let's call a spade a spade. She was one of those people in the last election who was beating the drum saying, the economy's great. What are you people talking about? It's fine. Just look at the CPI and look at this and look at that and look at. So I'm glad she's found religion all of a sudden. And she stopped drinking the Kool-Aid, at least for a day or maybe a few hours there. But understand the whole context of this. Democrats, you're being stupid is all she cares about. She wants the Democrats to fix their ways so they don't lose again. That's all that matters, not actually fixing the problem. We've had a 48-hour news cycle now. By the way, how brilliant is Trump that he announced this thing over the weekend? He gave the announcement on Monday. It's Wednesday at noon, and this is still the dominant story in America. and he's on the winning end of it. In fact, we're showing you how even members of the media who hate him have to concede that they and Democrats are lying about this issue. It's almost like some of the people in these newsrooms recognize that they have zero credibility by telling people that that blue sky ain't as blue as you think it is. So we've gone through this news cycle now where the Washington Post and the New York Times and all of these smart guys are trying to convince you that DC is a super safe city, even though their murder rate is higher than Bogota, Colombia, and Mexico City. But they're not doing something that I like to refer to as journalisming. You see, with journalisming, instead of just republishing and regurgitating crime stats that are being fed to you literally by the Biden Justice Department 7 months ago before they fled town, journalisming is actually talking to people impacted and affected by the policies, impacted negatively by the lack of control and law and order in Washington, D.C., and impacted positively by just 24 hours of Donald Trump's mobilization of federal law enforcement and National Guard. So let's do a little journalisming. In fact, it's specifically citizen journalisming. Here's a DC resident, lifelong DC resident, who has been impacted on both sides of the equation. Let him tell the story.
Reports show what, but you can't hide the crime, young. You can't do it. Let me give you something to break it down to you for those that don't understand. I retired from UPS, right? So what they used to do to play with the numbers or whatever, we have mission packages. You'll have drivers over the hours. They'd go in and enter the information, and the report would show whatever they needed to show to keep their bonus that week for their bosses not to fire their ass. So stop believing that stuff. And I don't know if you ever had to deal with the DC government, young, but they suck, young. They have got a lot more better now that the officers have did what they had to do and got all of these people out of the government and got rid of the riffraff and things of that nature. People actually do work now. Let me give you this for example, right? You got carry and conceals or whatever that were being issued by the DC separate department that was handling the gun license and the things of that nature. They went from turnaround time for like 4 months, 5 months for you to have to damn get a gun registered in DC and get a carry and conceal to 2 weeks. It used to take you 3 months just to get an appointment to talk to somebody and take your information and your gun down there. Now, you go online right now and they got appointments available tomorrow. How does that happen? What changed? You put some fire under their asses and now they want to do some work.
Now, that's his analysis and firsthand experience about what's going on in DC. But what about his impression of Washington just 24 hours after President Trump took his initiative? Well, take a look. Live from the streets. Well, not live, but recorded live from the streets of DC.
Man, down the city is quiet as a church mouse, young. I came all the way down Pennsylvania Avenue this morning. So peaceful, young. I don't smell no weed, young. I don't see no homeless people. I mean, I came all the way through the southeast side, all the way down here. You see now I'm at the White House jump, man. It's quiet, young. It's a shame that it takes somebody to have to sit in your classroom in order for you to be in order, yeah? Because that's what it feels like, yeah? You got to be babysitter to do your job, yeah? Stuff been out of control for years. You got to do better, yeah? You got to do better, yeah?
I love this guy. I love Dwayne. Thank you, Dwayne. Journalisming. Actually telling you what's going on, actually giving a firsthand report. Maybe the fact that so much of the media lying about this story for the last 48 hours are based in DC, and the people who work with them actually had the courage to say, dude, I saw your segment yesterday, right? The cameraman, maybe the sound operator, the people who don't have armed securities, the people who don't live in armed secure buildings who actually said, you're getting this wrong, man. Maybe it was the hair and makeup people as they were making them look pretty with their hairstyles before they read their teleprompters who said, maybe you should re-examine this. Not sure what got into them, but suddenly we saw a change of tone. It happened mid-afternoon, late afternoon yesterday. Take a look at this. Casey Hunt, CNN, interviewing the Attorney General. This is an elected official in the District of Columbia who is just like all these other attorney generals, or excuse me, in other cities, they're district attorneys or Commonwealth attorney. DC's weird. They have an attorney general, even though they're not a state, but he acts as a district attorney. He works along with the U.S. attorney, but he's got certain powers over certain crimes, whether he wants to prosecute them or not, whether he wants to prosecute people at a high penalty to put them away for a long time or let them off with a slap on the wrist. He championed the new laws that allow for juveniles to do literally murder and yet still get freed at the age of 21, no matter what. This guy, Casey Hunt, actually challenged him.
What do you say to DC residents who simply don't feel like the city is safer now than it used to be?
I tell them that I feel that as well, that we want all to work together to reduce crime to where there is no crime in our city. That's what we all aspire to do. One crime is one too many. But we also have to recognize that we have made meaningful strides on violent crime in particular.
Yeah, blah, blah, blah. That's your opening salvo question, softbally, that he was prepared for, memorized, and rehearsed. So now Casey Hunt gets some credit. Take a listen to this brutal follow-up question.
So let's talk about DC residents for a second, because these headlines, and I was a resident of DC for over 20 years. I've lived in all but 3 DC wards, okay? These headlines are different from when I first came to the city. 13-year-old girl, 13, sentenced to 7 years for 2023 beating death of a DC man. Teen sentenced in killing of Lyft driver who came to U.S. seeking safety. This was a guy who was a U.S. military interpreter who was shot and killed in an attempted carjacking, again, by a 16-year-old. Now, juveniles fall under you, and the DC Attorney General, Jeanine Pirro, DC Attorney Jeanine Pirro, has focused in on this inability that she says she has to prosecute juveniles. The law allows people up to the age of 24 years old to potentially have more lenient sentences from judges. Is that working for people in DC?
That, thank you, Newsbusters, for the clip, was a great question. Yeah, I've given Casey Hunt plenty of trouble on this show. What is changing here? What is different? I've got a hunch. I'm going to show you in a second. But let's go ahead and let the Attorney General, this failed, despicable, horrible elected official who has helped make DC as unsafe as it is, let's let him answer that brutal question.
What the president said yesterday at the press conference is very different than the facts on the ground here in the District of Columbia. We have done very well in reducing crime over the last couple of years. There's a lot more work to be done. But the fact of the matter is that local policing and local government have made meaningful strides in reducing crime in the District of Columbia. Our view is that if the federal government really wants to work with the District of Columbia to keep us safe, we welcome that. We are working every day and have been working every day with federal law enforcement in terms of keeping the residents and the visitors of DC safe. There was no need for a takeover of the MPD to.
Oh, he's just a liar, and I'm not going to insult your intelligence anymore with his lies. It was pathetic, and he left the studio a little battered and a little bruised, and that's a good thing. Things are moving in the right direction here, not just for policy in D.C., which, by the way, becomes a tipping point for every other city in this country, because if what President Trump is doing here works, and so far it is working, and people have to concede that it works, then every other major city in this country needs to look at their elected officials and say, hey, what gives? Why don't we do this? We don't need Trump to come in here and do it. Why don't you do it? That's what we pay you for, right? So policy-wise, things are moving in the right direction. Suddenly, the media, as you just saw, has to stop lying, and they start actually reporting the truth, the facts on the ground, and challenge some of these corrupt elected officials who have allowed this morass to become the status quo. What's different? What changed for the media? Well, like I said, it may have been anecdotal where people that they actually work with, or maybe their own lived experience, suddenly knocked on the door and said, no, you're wrong. DC is a problem, and it's not a crime problem. Let's be clear. It's a criminal problem because the criminals are allowed to break the law and they're not punished. That's the problem, and it needs to be fixed. I saw one reporter, a print reporter, take to the X social media platform yesterday and say, I don't know what Trump is talking about. The DC has crime problems, but it's not Mogadishu. And she was right. And she was supported with that assertion with some facts. Somebody replied to her and said, you're right. DC isn't Mogadishu. Mogadishu is way safer than Washington, D.C. And all the stats were laid out to prove that point. So what gives? What's happening? Well, I've been making fun of them for pointing at the charts and the data and the numbers to lie to you about the reality of crime in Washington, D.C. But allow me to show you a different chart, a chart that I think might be making a difference for how the news suddenly is being covered, at least on this story, out of Washington, D.C. Take a look at this chart. It's the latest overnight ratings for CNN right after this story hit. CNN is the middle column. It starts at 4 p.m. Casey Hunt, that's her show. You just saw it. And it goes all the way through 11 p.m. This is what the professionals like to call prime time. It's an important part of the cable news day. It's where they make their most money in advertising. Take a look at those numbers for CNN. I mean, it ain't much better for MSNBC. And of course, Fox News Channel is on the left. You look at the highest rated show for CNN. It was our buddy Jake Tapper, his first hour, the lead, with 479,000 viewers. Wow, that's something. The worst performing show last night was the 11 p.m. show at Fox News Channel, and they had almost triple the number that Jake Tapper had at 5 p.m. That's devastating. And if you add all of these numbers, let's do it in our head real fast together. 400, let's give him 500. That's 900 plus another 500 is 1,400, 1,900. You doing this with me? 2,300, 2,700. I'm being generous. 3,000, and then give him another 200. Let's round it up to 250. 3,250 is the total Nielsen rated audience from 4 p.m. through midnight for the entire primetime lineup combined into one big basket for CNN. 3,250. That's 3.25 million viewers total. Take a look at the 5 at 5 p.m. on Fox News Channel. One show for 1 hour had 3.35 million. That one show had more viewers than all of CNN from 4 p.m. till midnight. I could be wrong, but you know, we're all analyzing numbers and charts on crime and coming up with our conclusions. I just showed you the difference that just one day made with how CNN and MSNBC was reporting this story. Yeah, part of it is because they want to help Democrats. But the other part might be, I could be wrong, but it might be that they actually would like to attract viewers again.